Good morning, everyone. Welcome once again to another episode of College Football 10 with Avry and Miguel. I am Miguel. This is my partner, Avry. And we have some exciting matchups to talk to you about. And the first one we're going to talk about is Clemson versus Notre Dame. Now, Avry, after Notre Dame starting the season 0-2, they have won 5 of their last 6. If I'm Clemson, you cannot take them lightly in this game. They almost lost a game against Syracuse, but on the second half, they redeemed themselves. Now they're going to be on the road to face Notre Dame, in which should be an interesting game because, like I said, Notre Dame is catching fire. So who do you got?
You're right. This is an interesting matchup because of how Notre Dame started their season. Losses to Ohio State, losses to Marshall, losses to Stanford. And you're right, they are starting to get back on track. With Clemson, and it's interesting, Clemson is ranked number 4, so they're in the hunt for the playoff. They are undefeated, but they're kind of an underrated, undefeated team. Their quarterback, DJ Uiagalelei, is doing very well. He doesn't have very many interceptions. And during the Syracuse game, he came in, at clutch time. This is interesting because Clemson has really great passing yards, but Notre Dame is really good on that rush. But you're going to have to look at these defenses. Notre Dame is going to try and stop the Clemson passing game, but Clemson's rush defense is on point. They average less than 100 yards rushing. So I see this being a close game. I see Notre Dame fighting for it. I see Notre Dame trying to go for this upset. But I think Clemson, in a very kind of slow yet methodical way, is going to pull it out. But I do think it's going to be close. I'm going to say 32-30, but I'm going to go with Clemson.
Interesting. I have Clemson winning 24-21 in this game. I do think that, just like you said, at some way, somehow, they will escape. But I can't stress this enough. They have to play cleaner this time. Cleaner and much more smarter. Because DJ, he had the worst game of the season, but he redeemed himself in the second half. The whole team did. The Clemson's defense did, but this is Notre Dame we're talking about. You can never count them out. There's the name Fighting Irish for a reason, and they're going to fight till the end.
You're absolutely right, Miguel. Notre Dame is going to fight, and I think it's going to be a drag-out fight too, just like you say. Clemson's quarterback has got to be on point. If not, Notre Dame can take it. And they're playing at home in Notre Dame, so that could also be a factor as well.
And now, with one of my favorite rivalries in college football, Florida State Seminoles versus Miami Hurricanes. But as a Hurricane fan, it's tough because this is not the same rival, even though it's not the same rivalry from the 90s and 2000s. And clearly, the U has a long way to go. Once we thought that they were improving, but it's been a mess this season with injuries. They're still getting it together under the first year with Mario Cristobal. So, I don't know because Florida State, they just snapped a 3-game losing streak. They won last week. And with Miami, is like a hit or miss. So with these teams, you don't know what to expect. But I'm going to give Miami the edge on this one. It's going to be a low-scoring game, so I'll say 19-16 Miami.
It's interesting you mentioned this rivalry as one of the games we can talk about. For living in Florida, I just recently had a birthday, and remembering in school, this was the game that you had to pick your team. Otherwise, when you came back on Monday, you were getting made fun of because your team lost. Just like you said, these aren't the teams of the 90s and the 2000s, but it's weird because Florida State dominated in the 90s when these rivalries came up. And it was interesting because these games were played in early October, and they weren't even conference games then. They were just rivalry games. And for a lot of, let's say, alumni in Florida State and the University of Miami, this was the game that determined if you were the better Florida school. This is the rivalry that I think overshadows even Florida State and the Florida Gators. These two teams, Florida State and the University of Miami, have played 66 times already. Believe it or not, Miami leads the series 35-31. These games are always close. Occasionally you have a blowout here or there, but this is how in the early 80s, Jimmy Johnson created the state of Miami. They wanted Florida players south of I-4 to play for the U. This is how you do it. This is how you did it. So knowing that Florida State has a little bit better record, but both teams are still 500 in the conference, it's one of those where it is a rivalry game, but it's also a conference game now, and both teams want to prove they can still be bowl potential. They can still have that edge to still be a great football school. Miami has really great passing yards per game, but I think Miami's rush defense can be the key. I agree with you too. I think it might be a low-scoring game. I see this game being 20-19. I'm thinking really close, a point. And I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to go with Miami on this one. My heart says no, but Miami has to fix some things, and I think Coach Cristobal realizes what they need to do. So this could be a turning point game for Miami. So this is going to be it. So Miami, 2019.
For people out there who are watching this, if you haven't seen the U parts 1 and 2, 30 for 30, I highly recommend you should do so. I'm going to rewatch it again and again, probably today or tomorrow. But it's a fascinating documentary because it's about the past and the present. That documentary is just phenomenal. And I forgot who was it that mentioned it, but you had like more than one Miami Hurricane player saying that the Florida State are like the little brothers to Miami Hurricanes. So it kind of reminds me of the Clippers and Lakers, that kind of cheap shot. Yankees and Mets, etc. But when we talk about Florida State, Miami, you just love seeing the trash talk between them. And Miami does have a better record. But yeah, for those of you who haven't seen 30 for 30, the U parts 1 and 2, you can watch it on ESPN Plus. Is there.
I'm really glad you mentioned that documentary, Miguel, because when I saw it, Miami came into a bit of a new light for me. I grew up a little bit of a Hurricanes fan because I live not far from the school. But I think the best thing about those people who are Miami Hurricanes fans, if you just look at the alumni of football players that have come out of that school, your Marvin Harrisons, your Ray Lewises, Dwayne Johnson, and even the great coaches, Jimmy Johnson. I mean, they have produced some great football players, alumni. There's something about being part of the University of Miami, and the documentary, it showcases that. Also, there are even a couple of like reunion shows that brought back these players, Marvin Harrison, Ray Lewis, Coach Jimmy Johnson. Those are also worth looking into. There's history at Florida State too. Also, Bobby Bowden was a coach there for years. Deion Sanders, Ron Simmons.
Derek Brooks.
Derek Brooks, absolutely. These schools have produced great football players, great personalities that also encompass the rivalry itself. And you're right, too many Florida states like the little brother, especially those of us that live in South Florida. And it's kind of one of those games that you look forward to more than anything else, no matter where you live in Florida.